Thank you all for those introductions. And now I'm excited to introduce you to the team researching the representation of persons with disabilities in CSR programs. They're led by their project manager, Sharon, and made up of research interns, Brandy and Ayana. And now I'll hand it over to them to get started on their presentation. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to our presentation. My name is Sharon and I am a rising junior at Cornell and I study biology and society.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Brandy and I'm a rising senior at UC Berkeley studying business and social welfare.
Hi, my name is Ayana Montague. I'm a rising senior at Prairie View A&M University and I am studying biology.
Today we are sharing the results of our research on the representation of disability in corporate social responsibility programs. Our research takes a look at what % of companies have disability supporting CSR programs, as well as potential disability inclusive programs. We also dive into what top companies are doing for people with disabilities and how companies without disability related programs may be able to learn from those companies. What is CSR? Corporate social responsibility is practices and policies undertaken by corporations to be held socially accountable to stakeholders, customers, as well as the public. Many companies have programs that aid in different initiatives in the community, such as building homes for low-income families, providing resources for groups like people with disabilities, the LGBTQ+ community, people of color, as well as providing educational opportunities for underprivileged youth, just to name a few things that CSR does. So CSR programs have recently begun to focus more on environmental sustainability, as well as ethical production from diversity suppliers. An example of CSR can be seen in Google's sustainability report, which focuses on the company's efforts to reduce carbon emissions. Another notable CSR program is Microsoft's Youth Spark program. This program designed to create educational and economic opportunities for children around the world, and it has served 227 million young people since 2012. Another great example of CSR is MetLife's Teams Helping Hands program, that assembles prosthetics for the Special Olympics youth athletes. As you can see, CSR has major impact on the community, which is why we were curious to see how many of these programs are inclusive to PWD. Through corporate social responsibility programs, also known as sustainability programs, companies help communities and create positive social impact while simultaneously improving their brand and company performance. The origin of CSR goes back many decades, but the 1960s saw the emergence of charitable givings by companies. In the same decade, distinct social responsibilities expected of corporations were then outlined. In the 1970s, government regulations on environmental impact, product and worker safety, and hiring discriminations led CSR initiatives to shift from charitable donations to a strategized business practice. By the 1990s, many companies gained excellent reputations from CSR initiatives and proved the ethical values of those businesses and showed care for their customer bases. This consumer appeal stimulated additional funds from companies being put back into social responsibility in order to generate even more profit. Through the 2010s, CSR evolved into what we know today with growing commitment to diversity and inclusion. This can be seen in the growing number of types of CSR programs as each company strives to reach a wider range of people, particularly underserved communities and marginalized groups. In the global population, more than 1 billion people have a disability, which is about 15% of the world population. With that statistic in mind, it is not surprising that disability affects 73% of consumers in the market, which includes PWD or friends and family of PWD. A 2020 study by Rich Donovan found that out of 1,293 largest US companies, nearly 72% exhibit no publicly observable activity in relation to disability. And with that alarming fact, we came up with our research question. Our research question was, is disability adequately represented in CSR programs? Specifically, we looked at external CSR programs that focus on direct impact to the community rather than internal programs such as diversity, hiring, and employee resource groups. With few publications about disability programs in the CSR sector, we wanted to find out how top companies are doing in terms of support for PWD and recognize the good businesses are doing, as well as find areas of improvement for other businesses. To answer our research question, we examined the CSR and financial reports of 100 Fortune and Global Fortune 500 companies. From the CSR reports, we wanted to know what programs existed for PWD or included PWD. In addition, we were interested in finding the budget companies set aside for CSR and what percentage of the company revenue that budget was. Some companies were very straightforward about their CSR budget and highlighted the number in big bold text, while other companies were much less conspicuous about it. To gather primary data, we created a survey that was sent out to over 200 CSR managers from the companies we previously looked at. We also sent the survey into different CSR groups via LinkedIn. We would follow them and then message them. So that's how we contacted them. Key questions we asked included, how does CSR impact your company? What is your company's CSR priority? And does your company have CSR programs for PWD? If the answer was no to having programs for PWD, we then went into more specific details on whether those programs were extendable to PWD, as well as any plans to expand. The survey received over 700 views, and that's a number we're definitely not expecting. Despite 700 views, there were 8 partial responses and only 5 full responses. Limited responses meant we couldn't get further insight into CSR on top of what information was available publicly. Speaking to more CSR managers would enhance our understanding in the CSR landscape and get behind the scenes of future CSR endeavors. And due to the number of responses, we were unable to find out if companies had plans to expand inclusivity to PWD because 5 responses is not very representative of all companies. 5 complete responses out of over 700 views is very curious, and so we wondered, like, could CSR managers be hesitant to respond because they don't have disability-related data to report? Or are these CSR managers aware the company can improve their support for the PWD population? But one positive outcome from our survey is that we have at least sensitized hundreds of CSR managers to the inclusivity of PWD and CSR programs. And hey, who knows, these CSR managers might keep the survey in mind and do something with that, and do something for the disability sector. For future research, we would want to have continued contact with CSR managers so that we have an increased chance of receiving survey responses and therefore more raw data. Our team reviewed over 100 CSR reports and from Fortune 500 and Global Fortune 500 companies. However, we feel that in the future, all 500 Fortune 500 company CSR report should be looked at, as increasing sample size of companies will be more representative of population data. So let's look at key findings. Although the survey yielded few responses, analysis of publicly available data found in company CSR reports and websites provided a picture of the current CSR landscape as it relates to disability. Our examination of the 100 companies found low amounts of CSR spending by the vast majority of companies, as well as an underrepresentation of disability, with less than half of the companies offer disability-related CSR programs. Looking at the companies by sector, we observed differences in availability of disability-related programs, as well as program types. And while the majority of these companies do not yet offer disability-related programs, we found that most of these companies have existing CSR programs that could be expanded to include PWD. And we'll look more into the details of these findings in the following slides. First, looking at the CSR budgets, a percentage of annual revenue, approximately 3/4 of these companies allocate less than 2% of annual revenue to CSR programs, with the average CSR budget being 1.61% of revenue. Since disability is such a small part of CSR, the amount of spending on disability-related CSR programs is an even smaller fraction of companies' earnings. Only a few companies had available information about their dollar spending on disability-related programs. And these three companies here, Microsoft, Cisco Food, and Coca-Cola, all had CSR budgets greater than 2% of their annual revenue. Microsoft has invested around $25 million in its disability-related program called AI for Accessibility, which comes to about 0.37% of its overall CSR budget. Cisco Food and Coca-Cola have both allocated around $1 million to funding and partnerships with disability organizations, which amounts to only about 0.1% of their overall CSR spending. We can see that while these companies have relatively greater overall CSR budgets compared to most other companies, their spending related to disability is still a very small fraction of that. And based off of these spending patterns, as well as a lack of information about disability-related spending in many companies, it's clear that disability is currently not a major priority in the CSR space. We next examined how many companies of the 100 offered CSR programs that were disability related, either specifically for PWD or generally for diverse groups, including PWD. 4 of the 100 companies had disability related, PWD inclusive. This shows no change from prior research that found that approximately 44% of companies had philanthropic giving or community partnerships to disability related organizations. However, we did not see a change. We did see a change in another metric. The percentage of companies providing accessibility services or accommodations for their PWD customers. 56% of 100 companies had these accommodations, which is an increase from 35% in prior research. It shows us that businesses are introducing practices that are inclusive of PWD customers and are becoming even more common. However, disability-related CSR efforts for the general public and communities are still progressing a little bit more slowly.
So taking a closer look into the 44 companies that did have CSR programs supporting people with disabilities, we wanted to gain a better understanding of what types of disability-related programs are being offered currently. And we identified 8 main program types, which are listed here. Nonprofit partnerships and sponsorships, health resources and services, and professional and training opportunities are the largest categories, followed by grants and scholarships and education programs. The most common program type, nonprofit partnerships and sponsorships, includes collaborations with disability organizations such as Special Olympics, Disability In, National Disability Institute, the Blind Institute of Technology, International Hearing Society, and more organizations in order to provide resources, services, and advocacy for people with disabilities. One of these partnerships to highlight is Procter & Gamble's collaboration with the organization Be My Eyes. This partnership worked in order to connect sighted volunteers with the blind and low vision community to help navigate everyday life. The second most common type of disability-related program we found is health resources and services, which includes programs providing surgeries, rehabilitation, mental health resources, and telehealth for PWD. And one of these programs is the Rolex Awards for Enterprise program, which funded projects and treatments to help paralyzed people walk. Professional and training opportunities is the third most common program type, including PWD-specific internships, trade training, and networking programs. One of these programs is Disney's Launchpad, which offers a platform for diverse writers and directors, including people with disabilities, to create short films for Disney+, providing mentorship and material support. So these 3 most common program categories that we just saw, and even the next categories of grants and scholarships and education programs, seem to be the more established avenues for companies to extend their CSR efforts to PWD thus far, especially as companies may not yet know exactly how to best go about supporting people with disabilities, since disability-related programs are not hugely represented. With the top 2 categories, nonprofit partnerships and health resources, companies can leverage the expertise and infrastructure of existing organizations or health professionals that already support people with disabilities. These programs, along with professional opportunities, grants and scholarships, and education programs, are very common types of CSR programs offered for able communities as well. And so these models can be adapted to also support people with disabilities, as some of these companies have done. So we have these sort of more established main types of programs that are more common so far in the disability and CSR space. And these can serve as good models for companies who have not yet established any disability-related CSR programs. We did also find some innovative and promising programs outside of these major categories that are doing some unique things and might become more common as companies begin to include disability more in their CSR efforts. One unique program to highlight is Ford's City Solutions and City One Challenges, which brings together city governments, transit agencies, community organizations, residents, other companies, and entrepreneurs in workshops and collaborations to create mobility solutions and more accessible urban design in cities. In several cities in the US so far, Ford has funded these pilot programs for Tappy Guide, AbleLink, and Briarmetrics to provide routing solutions for people with disabilities through city streets and public transportation. So we thought this was a unique program that brings together many different groups to innovate ways to support people with disabilities and demonstrates the sort of influence that large companies do have to bring in other entities like cities, public agencies, other companies to create impact in the everyday lives of people with disabilities. So after identifying these different types of programs, we further examined the percentage of disability-related programs by sector. The industries represented are listed here, and each bar shows the percentage of companies in that given industry that had disability-related CSR programs. As you can see, the majority of industries represented in our data showed less than 50% of companies in the given industry having disability-related programs. These companies that are offering disability-related CSR programs are ahead of the competition and can serve as models for other companies in their respective industries. If we zoom in on the companies that do have disability-related CSR programs in each sector, there's also a different range of CSR program types. Receiving more responses from CSR leaders would perhaps give more insight into how companies choose the types of disability-related programs to offer. However, these different distributions of program types in each sector is likely also affected by just the sheer number of companies in each sector that do have disability-related programs. In particular, the sector that has the most different program types, technology, also has the greatest number of companies represented, with 8 companies with disability-related programs. These companies also have large overall CSR budgets ranging from approximately 123 million to over 6 billion. So they certainly have the capacity to expand their CSR efforts to people with disabilities. Although this sector has the greatest number of companies with disability-related programs, this still made up only half of all the technology companies that we examined, and the other half can look to examples from these companies. We see a similar pattern of program types in financial and professional services, another large industry which had just over half, 7 out of 13 companies with disability-related CSR programs. And in both financial services and technology, these sectors display the most common program types that we identified earlier. While on the other hand, these sectors of aerospace and telecommunications each only had one company represented that had a disability-related CSR program. So each just has one program type. As opposed to the larger sectors of technology and financial services, which had all of the most common program types, these companies had less common types, assistive devices, and awareness programming. American Airlines was 1 out of 4 total aerospace companies we looked at, and AT&T was 1 out of 3 total telecommunications companies we looked at. In sectors like these and and in any sector, companies should be looking to their peers and competitors who are doing things that they aren't. And perhaps like these companies here, they can take the opportunity to be a leader and bring attention to disability and CSR in their respective industries.
The data provided informative results about companies that have offered PWD supporting CSR programs, but also showed promising findings for companies without. Of the 56 companies with no program, about 84% have existing CSR programs that could be expanded to include PWD. These expandable programs include education, health, community, and grant programs that do not yet explicitly include PWD. On the next few slides, I will give examples of a few expandable programs. The Amazon Web Services Imagine Grant Program is a public grant open to registered 501c nonprofit organizations in the United States who use cloud technology. It aims to increase the prioritization of technology in nonprofit organizations. They accept proposals for pilot projects, proofs of concept, and existing programs that utilize technology in a new or expanded way. There are 2 award categories with $150,000 and $30,000 in financial support, respectively. This could be expanded to include technology for PWD to make life more accessible. Boeing partners with universities and higher education institutes globally to help interested students start a career in aviation with an emphasis on aeronautical science and aviation maintenance science. They provide internships, externships, co-ops, and enrichment programs. They also offer student scholarships with an award of $5,000 to $7,000 for 2 years. It is geared towards underrepresented minorities, females, and veterans. It could be expanded to include PWD. Through their small business grants program, Facebook has provided $100 million in grants and advertisement credits to small businesses globally. They invest in minority entrepreneurs, including women, the LGBTQ+ community, and small businesses started by people of color. It could be expanded to include entrepreneurs with disabilities. Companies can also look at established CSR initiatives for PWD for inspiration and/or guidance. On the next few slides are examples of some successful programs. As part of their affordable housing initiative, CVS Health contributed $15.3 million towards the building of almost 150 homes for seniors in Ohio, including those with disabilities, and $4.3 million to those in Alaska, including those with mental disabilities. CVS Health also collaborates with Cornell University's School of Industrial and Labor Relationships for the Just-in-Time Disabilities Toolkit to help with resources and engagement for PWD. The Adobe Artist Development Fund awards $12,500 to 40 artists that identify with a diverse community, including PWD. The fund provides financial support for renting venues, equipment purchases and rentals, models, artist materials, and other related expenses. Another program, the Adobe Design Circle, focuses on promoting diversity and leadership. The underlying scholarship initiative awards 10 annual college scholarships totaling to $100,000 over 4 years each. The scholarship is geared towards design-related careers among those who identify with an underrepresented community, including PWD. American Airlines conducted community projects in Peru, headed by Sonia Lopez, to help schools and hospitals to produce prosthetics for disabled children. The company also took customer feedback into consideration when starting a new initiative to increase passenger accessibility, such as installing an elevator for customers in wheelchairs. Citigroup works to provide affordable housing for PWD and have adjusted their app to better support veterans and PWD. Citigroup has partnered with the National Disability Institute to provide $2 million to promote financial empowerment and inclusion for those who are disabled and their loved ones. This initiative includes connecting PWD with needed financial resources. For future research on PWD representation in CSR programs, it may be beneficial to do a more in-depth look at the financial aspects of these programs, like how much they cost, how much they benefit the companies financially and reputation-wise. This could inspire more companies to include PWD in their CSR initiatives. This may also help combat the biggest issue of low participation in the survey sent out, which could benefit future researchers. Future researchers could also be more active on social media and send out regular emails to promote advocacy for this important topic. Throughout the 10 weeks that we have worked on this research paper, we reached out to over 200 CSR managers and kept in touch throughout the primary data collection. We sensitized over 700 CSR executives for inclusion of disability with detailed survey questions. We reviewed 100 2020 CSR reports and annual revenue reports. In addition, we did extensive research to find secondary sources to understand what gaps in this field needed to be filled. From our research, we have found an answer to our initial research question, which is disability adequately represented in CSR programs? The answer to that is that people with disabilities are yet to be fully included in CSR programs and are still underrepresented in the CSR landscape. The outcome we are striving for is that our research will spread more awareness for the need to be more inclusive to PWD. Acknowledging the need to allocate more resources for PWD through CSR programs may influence companies to begin the process of being more inclusive to this group. Companies may not be aware of PWD needing resources and therefore need that push. Thank you so much for joining our presentation. We will now be taking any questions regarding our research.
Thank you so much for that awesome presentation. If we can give them a big round of applause on screen or using the emoji.